Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, and Brian Murphy with you once again as we have come upon our final regular season show, gentlemen. Isn't it saddening to know that that another UCF season of athletics has gone by?
It's saddening more to think about, to know that I actually have to think about topics to talk about on this podcast.
I know. Well, hey, listen, you're not the guy who has to find a way to come up with a new post every day, okay? So I don't want to hear about it. We are blackandgoldbanneret.com, the SB Nation soap for UCF sports. You can follow us at UCF_Banneret on Twitter, Facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret. We do have a lot to talk about on the show. This is coming up on the end of May. We're going to wrap up baseball as the Knights go 2-2 in the American Baseball Championship, and do not get invited to the NCAA Tournament, much to their dismay and disappointment. We will wrap up also. By the way, we'll also touch upon rowing, who's still going, and also track and field, by the way, still going. The 4x100 meter relay team, they're going to the NCAA National Finals as well. And a couple other things that we'll be talking about as well. So plenty for us to sort of dive into. This will be a relatively short show for us, but let's go ahead and start out by talking about baseball. As the Knights ended up falling to the eventual champions, the Cincinnati Bearcats. UCF lost their first game in the tournament. Won 2 in a row, including obviously the dramatic game against Memphis, but then fell to Cincinnati in the semifinals. They had to beat Cincinnati twice on Saturday, and they lost in the first game 10-6. It's just one of those things where, Jalen Whitehead was the starter, worked 4 innings. Actually, I thought pitched pretty well. Put UCF kind of in a position where if the bats could wake up, they could win, but and force that extra game on Saturday. But it just it was not meant to be. What's really bizarre is the Cincinnati offense, which I did the math on this. They were last in the league in runs. It took them until their third game of the tournament to actually get out of last place. Because the team that was in last place was South Florida, and South Florida did not play in the tournament, so think about that for a second. But Cincinnati scored, they averaged about 4.5 runs a game, a little bit over 4.5 runs a game in the regular season in the American. And in this tournament, they scored, what was it, Brian? 51 runs on 60 hits in 4 games, which works out to some almost 13 runs per game. They beat UConn in the final 22-5, and end up stealing a bid because they worked themselves. They were 3 games under 500 heading into the tournament. They finished the tournament 1 game over 500, which is just like, everyone I talk to always says the same thing when I mention it. They're like, that's just baseball. That's just a baseball thing, And congrats to Cincinnati. And by the way, they were 0-8 in the American Athletic Conference tournament. This year they go 4-0. I don't know. It's Cincinnati, man. But in the end of the day, Brian, you've been close to this team throughout the year. What really was their undoing in the tournament?
Well, their bullpen was pretty short, and in that final game against Cincinnati, you kind of saw it. They really, Jalen Whitehead gave them what they needed, which is basically 4 innings. But then after Garrett Westberg and Kyle Kemp, they really didn't have people they thought they could really depend on. Zach Hunziker was okay most of the year. Jack Sinclair has good stuff, but it's just so up and down. It's been frustrating to watch him pitch it many times. And then otherwise, they've just been ravaged by injuries. For this tournament, Jeffrey Hickinson and David Litchfield were out because of injuries going into the tournament. And then you had guys who were injured during the season who were going to be critical pieces in that bullpen who just weren't unavailable. And so they were kind of short-staffed going into that Cincinnati game. And as much as their offense can score runs, I think that pen just sort of broke too much in that last game. And unfortunately, when you look at the way things broke for UCF with the tournament selection show, it really was. It probably turns out being that only one more win is the difference between them either getting in the tournament or being where they are now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you look back at that game, they were up 5-2 after 5. They were up 5-4 after or 5-2 after 4, 5-4 after 5, and then they gave up 2 obviously in the 5th, 3 in the 6th, 1 each in the 7th, 8th, and 9th, and then that was it.
I should also note that 4 of those runs were unearned. There were 3 errors, and a pass ball that contributed to 4 unearned runs, and when you lose by 4,
Yeah. I mean, exactly. So that takes us to Selection Monday, and we knew UCF was on the bubble. I think Baseball America on the last day put UCF in.
Yeah.
I think, is that right? And then
they had them out and they moved them in even after the loss to Cincinnati.
Right, and then D1 Baseball, I forget if they moved UCF from in to out or if they kept them in but barely.
No, they moved them out. They moved them out.
And
they were, I believe, the 2nd or 3rd team out.
Yeah, and then the end result was UCF gets left out. I think Baseball America in the end said they hit 63 of the 64 teams. Yep. The one that they missed was UCF, and the team that went in over UCF, according to them, was Texas Christian, TCU, who finished with an RPI of 59. By the way, Houston was left out as well. I don't think that's as much of a surprise, although Todd Whitting came out after the selection show was over and went to bat for his team and UCF and the conference in general. Said that both teams should have been in. Shout out to Coach Whitting for that. But yeah, well, to say I don't know. I feel like you could play this both ways. You could say, well, it's controversial. UCF should have been in. Eric, I know you're chomping at the bit to get after this one. Don't worry. Yeah. On the other hand, there is a part of me that's like, well, dude, you finished sub 500 in the conference and 2-2 in the conference tournament. You got it. At some point, you got to win the games against your own competition, and to an extent, UCF failed to do that. I will now take that relatively even-handed and level-headed take and put it in the refrigerator and hand the podium over to Eric Lopez, who has a decidedly different take on Monday's events. Eric, you may go.
No, I mean, here's the thing. You can make the argument, should UCF been in or out? Yeah, I think you could say, you know what, they did. There were certain games they should have won. Think back to the regular season finale against Cincinnati where they're 1 pitch away from winning the series. That could have made the difference. Maybe that Sunday weird game against Auburn with a slugfest could have been the difference. That's not the issue. That's all great. The problem is, with all that being said, UCF's resume is way better than TCU. TCU has six losses against teams 100 or worse, including 3 losses against teams 150 or worse in the RPI. That's atrocious. And they went 3-2 in the Big 12 tournament, and the excuses that they were used why they were in was embarrassing. It was like, well, they had some injuries and they're starting to get. What team doesn't have
I know
injuries this
that's
time of year?
That excuse is ludicrous. It's just flat ludicrous.
It is one of the most. I got to tell you something. I don't think UCF got screwed, but I think college baseball as a whole got screwed on Monday by one of the most pathetic, embarrassing selections that a committee has ever done in any sport. And you could have put manure on a piece of paper and done a better job. It would have smelled better than the committee's job on Monday. That's how pathetic it was. And it's embarrassing on a lot of levels for the sport when you consider the seedings they got in and the hypocrisy. Florida was 5 under 500 in the SEC. Barely made the SEC tournament. They needed a sweep in the end of the regular season against Missouri at Missouri just to make sure they were in the SEC tournament. Lost in the opening round of the SEC tournament, single elimination in the first round, and they're not even one of the last four in? Are you kidding me? Just mixed messages, terrible seedings, and I got to tell you something, Jeff, and I know you don't like to hear this. The conference tournament format screwed the league last week. Screwed them big time. And I'll start with two ways. East Carolina was, in a lot of views, was a top 8 national seed going into this tournament, but because they got to play in this tournament, double elimination, got beat twice by Wichita State, they dropped to a 10 seed. When in reality, some would argue you probably should protect your regular season champion better in a conference tournament format. By the way, no regular season champion, number 1 seed, still has not won the American Conference Tournament. Houston got screwed because they went 0-2 in the tournament, lost their last 3 games. UCF got screwed because they went 2-2, but their 2 wins were not, quote, quality wins because Tulane and Memphis had terrible RPIs. And the league got screwed because Cincinnati, who was garbage outside the league, couldn't even win a series against Niagara, stole the bid from a better team. It was a terrible week for the league in that regard, and that is why they got stuck with not only just 3 teams instead of 4, but probably their worst case scenario, their 3 weakest teams they could have gotten into the field.
Let me push back on something that you said there, because you said that you got to protect your seed, and ECU got beat twice. Well, one of those games was their first game. So if it's a single elimination tournament, guess what? They would have been out anyway.
No. But see, what you should do with that, what I would do, you've got 9 teams in the league. You give ECU a bye into the semifinals, and the other 8 teams play it out. That's how you reward a regular. This would accomplish a few things. It would reward the regular season champion, which they should be rewarded. And here's the thing: this league is a top 5 league every year. And it's now been proven that if you win the regular season in the American Conference, odds are you're in great shape to host a regional. And in this year's case, East Carolina, they could have been a top 8 national seed. But because they win on Saturday and they have a quick turnaround, they got to throw their midweek against Wichita, who's playing for their life, and as we found out, for their coach's job, which didn't matter because he was fired right after the tournament. What do they benefit from that? It's a disadvantage. To me, what I would do, you move the regular season champion, gets a bye into the semifinal. They don't play until Friday, let's say. And then you would have everybody in the tournament. You would have 2 versus 9, let's say, 3 versus 8, 4 versus 7, and then 5 versus 6. That's how you would reward a regular season champion.
Then you would have 5 teams in the semifinals.
No, you wouldn't.
Yeah, you would. You'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
No. 2 versus 9, 3 versus 8, 4 versus 7, 5 versus 6. You eliminate them till you eat you're going to have ECU is going to play the winner, whoever gets out of that bracket.
All right, we're gonna have to put the bracket doctors on that one. Listen, I understand where
it doesn't work. The SEC has figured this out. What they do is they have their bubble teams play single elimination the first round, and then they do double elimination in the middle rounds. And the reason they do that is they want to protect their bubble teams from losing twice, so they can get the benefit of the doubt from the committee, and that's what happened with Florida. That's the negative of a double elimination format.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how else you format the tournament so that it would make that kind of sense. Because you could also, I mean, let's give credit to Cincinnati. I mean, they finished second in the conference in the regular season, and
you can. I would argue Cincinnati actually hurt the league this year because they're terrible non-conference schedule. And here's the other thing I would do in the conference tournament: if you don't have an RPI of 50 or better, if you lose in the conference tournament once, you're gone. You're gone. Bye-bye.
So we complain all the time about the RPI and how much and how random it seems at times. And now you're saying that you would throw your fate in the conference title to what your RPI? I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, no, because let's be honest. Here's the deal. Odds are your at-large teams are going to be in the RPI 50 range, obviously. And usually if you have an RPI in the 50s, you probably played a good non-conference schedule or, to carry that. You already have a good league. Tulane played an awful non-conference schedule, an embarrassing non-conference schedule. Cincinnati did not play a good non-conference schedule. The league needs these teams to step up their non-conference schedule, and the way you motivate that is by saying, if you get to the conference tournament and your RPI is this low, if you lose once, you're gone. And that would also speed up the conference tournament, which needs to happen. That tournament dragged on.
That's a little too loony. I would be in favor of seeding the conference tournament by RPI instead.
That's fine. But they're going to have to figure out something to help themselves get more teams into the tournament, because they could have gotten 4 teams in. Obviously, there was 3 bids that were stolen on Sunday, with Ohio State winning the Big Ten tournament, Southern Miss winning the Conference USA tournament, and obviously Cincinnati winning the American Conference. So they, but I just don't. I really feel bad for Cliff Godwin, because they should have been a top 8 national seed, and those 2 losses that really didn't. They shouldn't have to play those games based on the way they ramp it through the regular season. Has to mean more than the conference tournament. That's my big issue.
Murph, can you untangle that Gordian knot?
There are some things there that Eric said that I agree with. I agree that ECU I agree that your conference regular season winner needs to get more of a favor in your conference tournament than just facing the lowest available seed, because baseball in a 1-game atmosphere is really random and doesn't really give the number 1 seed that much of an advantage, especially when they're not throwing their ace on that opening Tuesday, because that ace threw on Thursday and just hasn't had enough time to rest to actually throw that game. So I wouldn't mind working out a way where those top seeds get a first-round bye in the conference tournament. The whole thing about the RPI is a little weird for me, because didn't we have a team that made the NCAA Tournament at 59? And so if we cut it off at 50, then technically we're cutting off teams that could make the NCAA Tournament, even though this is
Texas State at 52 would like a word this year, by the way, with you.
If I wanted to throw a number, I'd throw out a top 100, because then that gives you that still gives you 3/5 of all of baseball, because we have 299 teams.
I'm not married to the top 50 number. It could be 60, 70, whatever we can do.
Yeah.
There's teams there's certain teams. Look, Tulane and Cincinnati hurt the league this year because their non-conference was bad, and I think that hurt the Houstons and UCF from getting more quality wins, because the problem is for UCF is you play Tulane and you beat them, but you don't get any credit for it because their RPI is so bad. And so you're in a no-win situation.
We've talked about it for a lot of times this year on this podcast. This league is not as good as it was last year.
That's true.
And so that will change. I believe it'll certainly change some teams like Wichita State and USF getting better. So that'll change. That's kind of an annual year-to-year thing that, it's kind of ebbs and flows. Back to UCF, though, it's disappointing, that they're left out, especially when they're left out over a team they're clearly better than. I mean, people who do the projections for a living, did not have TCU even in the next 4 out. They weren't even the top 8 among teams that missed the tournament. So then all of a sudden to have them in the tournament and have the reasoning be that they have a good pitching staff and they're getting healthier, it's not even an argument. That's nothing. That sounds like something happened under the table that you don't want us to know about.
I'll tell you what it is. I know what it is.
I know what it is.
Oh,
too,
boy.
I'll let you expound upon it.
Oh boy!
But
Gird your loins, kids.
I do want to finish with that. But UCF knew what they needed to do in this tournament going in. They knew that 2 wins would get them in the conversations, and then 3 wins would probably lock them in. And unfortunately, that turned out to be pretty much true. If they win one more game and at least force a second game against Cincinnati on Saturday night, then they're probably in this tournament with one more win. But they come up short, and thus they are the first 4 out this second year in a row, which is really painful.
Instead, we put in a team in TCU that was also under 500 in the Big 12 and have quality losses, including Lamar, who has a quality 215 RPI. Lamar went into Fort Worth and beat them 10-5. They also lost to Long Beach State 14-3, who has a quality RPI of 227.
Hey, Long Beach State is usually much better.
Don't you cast aspersions on Long Beach State on this show?
That's not defending my territory.
And then they also had another quality home loss to one of Jeff's favorite schools, Seton Hall, and their quality 184 RPI, 7-3. Give me a break.
Could have been worse. They could have lost to St. Peter's, but anyway.
I'm surprised they didn't. They just didn't schedule it. Maybe they were afraid. I don't know. Here's my thing. If they would have put in a Texas State that won the Sun Belt or a BYU that won the West Coast Conference, hey, you know what? It's fine. I get it. You're rewarding a regular season team. I can deal with that. I thought the committee did a good job last year when we had UCF missed out. And I'm like, you know what? They're rewarding teams for their regular season success. But they obviously didn't do that this year. Look, I think for UCF, what hurts about this one is this team played their tails off the last month. Really, the fact that we're even having this conversation is amazing to me because I'm pretty sure all three of us put this team 6 feet under about a month ago after they lost that Cincinnati series. And we're like, well, this season's done. Yeah. And it could have been easily for everybody to pack their bags and say, well, it's a lost year. Nothing went right. We lose Holloway. We lose a bunch of other arms in the bullpen. We have issues in the bottom of the order, blah, blah, blah. And they didn't. They played tough. They made a run at it and nearly pulled off getting into the NCAA tournament. My hat goes off to the coaching staff and the players for squeezing as much out of this year, more probably than they should have, really. And I feel bad for them. Not that yes, they left games. We could discuss the certain games they could have prevented them from being in this position. I just wish that the committee would take their job a lot more seriously because it does. These guys work their tails off from fall ball all the way to spring, and to just have a pathetic showing like putting in a TCU is just embarrassing for the sport. So I feel bad for these guys who left it all in the field. Obviously could have left, a game or two here could have changed things, but it's a tough pill to swallow.
Well, Eric, do you want to tell us why TCU got in? Because I know, but I know you know too. So just tell us the
wow. Do you want to? I'll defer to you if you want to go ahead and spill the bean. I don't know.
The real reason is that, well, at least it's been rumored by people who know these sort of things, is that the Texas AD is on the selection committee, and there might
Chris Del Conte. Yep.
There might have been some favors done.
We used to work at TCU.
Correct. So it's not a huge shocker that TCU gets in when one of their good friends is on the selection committee.
Little tinfoil. Is this tinfoil hat stuff?
I usually don't delve into this realm. This is usually Eric's domain.
It's usually Eric.
And that's why for all the people, we're going to scream in December every year about the football committee and how there's politics and, I wish they don't decide it on the field. Hey, it's all more fair in the other sports. No, it's not. It's just as political in the other sports with more teams, and it's just it's unfortunate. It's very unfortunate that that's the case. That there was some politics involved in that, I'm sure, because, TCU had no business. And I feel bad more, again, not UCF. This is not a UCF, hey, UCF got screwed deal. This is more of the Texas States, the Houstons, the UCFs, the BYUs. There's plenty of more deserving teams that don't get an opportunity. Texas State did all they had to do in the Sun Belt, won the league, and they had 2 bad games in 1 week and get punished for it, whilst TCU can have a bunch of terrible games and get rewarded somehow because they got good buddies in the committee. It's just unfortunate.
Expand the tournament. No, I'm just kidding.
Just get better. Let me run the tournament. I will do the.
You pick all the teams, Eric. You pick all the teams, and
I have the data. I can get I could do a better job than some of these people do.
Well, you're never not going to get credit for sticking your neck out on that one. Murph, I'm going to leave the last word to you. And I know this is probably going to be filed under like the way too early category, but departures, returnees, everything. What if you're a UCF baseball fan, and I know that there are many of them listening to this program, what are the things that you look forward to heading into the 2019-2020 season that you're like, okay, this is going to get us over the hill?
Well, I don't really have great news for you, Jeffrey.
Oh boy! Great! Wow. Okay.
Ready to go.
There are a lot a lot of valuable pieces leaving this team. And here's the sampling. Basically, their top 4 hitters are all gone. I would assume all gone. Now, 2 of them, Tyler Osick and Matthew Micah, are seniors. They're gone. I am pretty sure that Ray Alejo, the leadoff hitter, center fielder, is also gone, even though he's a junior. He'll be gone in the draft. I guess my only question would be Dallas Beaver, their leading RBI man, catcher, first baseman. And so I don't know. Maybe he'll be drafted. I think he might not be drafted, but if he is, then he will go too. But I'm more on the fence at that. But they have a possibility of losing probably their top 4 hitters. I should also mention that I've been told by people in the program that Anthony George, who is really their best hitter in the fall and has played catcher and third base for them this year, he and Greg Lovelady are not too fond of each other. I don't know if he'll be back on this team. And then if you go to the mound, their entire starting rotation from the last month of the season are all seniors. Grant Sherman, Chris Williams, Jordan Spicer, they're all gone too. Jordan Spicer's had a really rocky 2 years here, but then he turned in his best performance as a Knight, probably the best performance of any pitcher in a Knight's uniform this season in the conference tournament in a game against Tulane.
I agree with that. He was so good in that Tulane game. That was a masterpiece.
And it was emotional. And he pitched as a baseball player. He said right up front, like, he didn't know if that may have been his last start as a baseball player, which is so amazing to see where he's come from 2 years where he was a pretty highly respected JUCO transfer, and then he was persona non grata. He lost his control. He just couldn't throw strikes. And then when he started to falter, it mentally got to him. He was reading message boards where people were criticizing him, telling him how much he was a bust, and that got to him. He had to delete his social media. He really had to go back to square one and just build himself up again. And it took a while, and then he was their best pitcher this season for the last 6 weeks. And on that night against Tulane, he was outstanding against one of the top 10 offenses in the nation. It was really emotional for Greg Lovelady, who was almost near tears in his post-game interview on the field, and then for Spicer. It was quite a moment. But they're all gone. They're all gone as well. And then in the bullpen, their 2 most trustworthy relievers, Kyle Kemp and Garrett Westberg, they're seniors as well. And I should also mention Griffin Bernardo, who was a pretty good prospect coming out of Lake Brantley a couple years ago as a third baseman. It didn't really go well for him in his 2 years here. Offensively, he never seemed to get a hold of it. And then defensively, he kind of got a case of the yips at third base. He has decided to stop playing baseball. So yeah, all that's gone. What's coming back? Well,
so what's the good news?
So Dalton Wingo, I think is the thing you can really hang your hat on offensively. He's a sophomore outfielder who really broke through this season as the middle of the order bat, second the team in RBIs, really with some clutch hits too. Offensively, though, I can't point to another player and go like, this guy's got a lot of good potential on the way up. Like, there's some pieces there, but like nothing you point to and say that guy could be a star. I think Dalton Wingo could be a star, and then I have no idea what else to expect of the other guy.
What about my boy Jay? What about my boy Jay Lyons? Is he?
Jay Lyons is 2 weeks of fame. Maybe he can extend that into a full season. It just after those 2 weeks were up, when he was getting walk-off hits against Memphis and whatever else, he just sort of disappeared. It's too bad. But UCF got healthier offensively, and he ran out of a position to play. Maybe he'll certainly should get more of an opportunity next year because there are a lot of spots to fill.
Yeah.
And then pitching wise, they will have Trevor Holloway back. He'll be I believe he'll be a senior next year. He was really good in 6 starts for UCF. He had about a 2 ERA before he had some bicep tendonitis that shut him down for the season.
How much of a difference could he have made, Murph? If he would have stayed healthy? I feel like that's kind of one of the what ifs in this year with some of the injuries they had. If they would have had a Holloway healthy this year, could that have made a couple of games difference?
I don't think so, and I'll tell you why. Because this team lost one midweek game all year. Right, so no matter if they were throwing bullpen games or they were throwing Spicer out there in midweeks, they never lost a midweek game. So even if Holloway was in the weekend rotation and Spicer was in the midweeks, well, they're still kind of winning the same games because Spicer was just as good as Holloway was when Holloway was in the rotation. And then once Spicer got to be himself, he was put back in the rotation and kind of just repeated what Holloway did. And so they don't really gain anything from Holloway being there, because they just would have gotten his contributions on Sunday, which they already got from Spicer anyway. And then they didn't really need Spicer to be that great on midweeks, because they won those games regardless. Right. So I don't think anything would have changed. But Holloway will be back. Then they'll probably have to fill the next 2 spots in the rotation. Maybe Jalen Whitehead will compete for one of those spots. Maybe Zach Hunsaker will compete for one of those spots. Bullpen, then you'll have, again, Whitehead, Hunsaker, Jackson Clare, I believe, is back. And then a couple of decent bullpen arms. One in particular, Jeffrey Higginson, who was really the closer at the start of the year. Jeffrey Higginson was the closer at the start of the year. Had some rough outings, but really has probably the best stuff in that bullpen. He'll be back. So at least
don't forget also Joey Sheridan too. I mean,
yeah, you hope that Joe Sheridan comes back from his shoulder surgery. Well, you never know with shoulders. They also should have Zach Helsel back. Zach Helsel had Tommy John surgery early in the year, but he should be well enough by next spring to come back. So you have a decent bullpen. You have at least 1, maybe 2 starting pitchers, and then a couple of hitters, and then we don't know. I can't really even talk about prospects or recruits yet, because we've seen UCF high school recruits be taken in the draft, and they never make it here. So I can't really talk about those guys yet either until the draft is done on Monday and Tuesday. So but there's so much to rebuild here. And I think I think it's not that it's too bad that they missed their chance. I don't think they feel like they missed their chance, because this team went through so much this year that last year's team didn't go through. So much more adversity, really tough losses, really amazing one-run wins, lots of injuries. This team had a lot of fight, and really I don't think was as talented as the 2018 group, which was also among the first 4 out. But for this team to basically achieve the same almost felt like a victory, because of everything they had to go through with the injuries and just everything on the pitching staff. And as Eric said, the bottom of the lineup was not very good. So I think in the end, just the way that this season ended, even though it ended in the same spot and it ends kind of feeling empty, what Greg Lovelady was able to get out of this team, I think surpasses what he was able to get out of the 2018 team, which probably should have made the tournament and underachieved.
Yeah, so the whole was greater than the sum of the parts this year. All right, well,
well, remember, and they'll bring in some new faces. I mean, obviously the draft's got to sort itself out.
They will through the JUCO market and the grad transfer market once again. Again, guys like Osick and guys like Grant Sherman. I mean, these are transfers and JUCO transfers, so they'll do those. They'll do it again.
Yep.
And they also have a transfer that redshirted this past year, Connor Allen, who transferred from Miami. So I mean, that's college baseball in a nutshell, right? The roster, there's turnover because of MLB drafts, guys that never said, like Murph said. So you just got to give Greg the benefit of the doubt. And Murph, there's 260 days till opening day.
I'm counting down.
Here we go. So, all right. So that'll put a wrap on UCF baseball for now. We keep an eye on the draft as that comes open, and then we're hoping to hear from Greg Lovelady and maybe some players who happen to not want to clean out their lockers probably just yet in the coming days. So when we do, I'm sure we'll be hearing from them soon. All right, we're going to take a break. Stick around. We'll come back. We're going to talk about UCF's athletic program as a whole this year. How did the Knights do in comparison to other schools in D1? We've got that and more when we return. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Back after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Back here at the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, Brian Murphy with you. Follow us at UCF_Banneret on Twitter and Facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret. And of course, blackandgoldbanneret.com. All right, so we're almost to the end of the athletic season for UCF, which means, of course, the Bannies will be coming up, and we're gonna do our nomination show next week. So have that on the calendar. There will be sending out some. We'll be writing up who we think are nominated for.
And by the way, we're not going away. I know other
Right.
shows take vacation, wait till fall ball, fall football starts and all that. No, we're gonna have a lot of special shows throughout the summer. We got some exciting guests, UCF related. We're gonna have throughout the summer. So we're not saying bye bye, but the Bannies are obviously
Right.
At the forefront coming here soon.
So here's what we got. A couple things the last couple things we're going to be keeping an eye on. Rowing. They are going to be at the NCAA Championships, having won their 5th consecutive American Athletic Conference Championship. They're at the NCAAs this coming weekend, 31st of May through Sunday, June 2nd. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. And then also, congrats to the women's track and field 4x100 meter relay team. They qualified for NCAA Nationals. So they're going to be going to the championships in Austin as they got an automatic berth as the 3rd place team in their heat at the East preliminaries. And we'll be keeping an eye on them. They'll be strutting their stuff for before the best track and field teams in the country in Austin. So that will be something that we will also keep an eye on. The Austin or the championships in Austin will be June 5th through the 8th. That's next Wednesday through Saturday. So we'll be monitoring that closely as well. All right, so some news dropped a little earlier today that UCF, this is from the release. I'm going to quote the release here from UCF. UCF is the only athletic program in the country that has seen all of its head-to-head sports post winning records in each of the last 2 athletic seasons, 2017-18 and 2018-19, among the 130 NCAA Football Bowl subdivision teams. 1 year ago, UCF joined Florida State, Oklahoma State, and Texas in accomplishing that feat, but the Knights were the only athletic program to repeat that distinction this year. Also this year, Minnesota and North Texas produced all winning team sport records in 2018-2019. UCF qualified teams for the NCAA championships or a postseason bowl game in football, volleyball, men's soccer, men's basketball, men's tennis, women's golf, and rowing, while also sending individuals in men's golf and women's outdoor track and field. They claimed conference titles in football, volleyball in the regular season, men's soccer in the regular season, women's tennis, and rowing. So, let's go to you, Eric Lopez, because I know you and I, we like to talk about, kind of compare historic runs and all that. Is this the best year for UCF sports ever?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, overall, I don't see how you can, where I believe, 12 out of 16 teams made postseason. The only teams that didn't make postseason at UCF was baseball, which we just ranted about, 30, 40 minutes, how they could have easily been in. With a bounce of a ball, with literally maybe a pitch from making the tournament. Softball was one of the first 5 teams out in the NCAA tournament, and if they would have finished better than 6-12 in their last 18, probably get in. Women's soccer, which arguably is the flagship program from an on-the-field tradition and success standpoint, was literally a win away on the final day of the regular season from winning the conference championship and hosting the conference tournament in women's soccer. And then men's golf, which has been a traditionally good program, an NCAA perennial. They did not make the tournament this year. That's it. Everybody else made the NCAA tournament or a bowl game like football did, and it was historic. I think you absolutely have to say this is, from an overall balance, this is the greatest year in UCF athletics. The only one I can even think of was like 2010, 20 year there where football had great success and won the Liberty Bowl and won Conference USA and was ranked for the first time, and men's basketball had a good year and made the postseason, things like that. But you've never, from top to bottom, had this much success to the point where every team on head-to-head competition had a winning season. And by far, we're not talking like the worst record, I think, was women's soccer was like 3 over 500.
Yeah.
Everybody else is like, you're talking 60, 65% win percentage at a minimum. Just an amazing product across the board with historic years from the tennis programs, women's golf and their great run to the national championship round. Yeah, I would say, from an overall top to bottom, this is the greatest year in athletic department, and this is, I think, part of the vision that Danny White had when he first got here and said, I want this to just be I don't want this to just be a top 25 football program. I want this to be a top 25 athletic department as far as all sports. And right now, it's on its way.
Murph, you have a pulse on the national conversation around some of these major sports here that we're talking about. Do these things, we call them the Olympic sports, right? Football, aside from football and men's basketball and women's basketball, do these sports, the fact that UCF is good at them, does that make waves to you according to, across the college sports world? Like, to what extent do people look at that and say, okay, this UCF program, they're not some flash in the pan, football program. They have a real program that they're working on over there.
Yeah, I mean, football and basketball suck all the action out of the building. That there's not a whole lot of room left for your baseballs, your soccers, your tennis programs, unless you are, a real diehard. So I think nationally, unless they win a national championship or make the Final Four in one of those other Olympic sports, it doesn't catch much people's eye. Even in baseball, when they're competing to get in the NCAA tournament, I don't think people look at UCF baseball as it's a good team, but not a team like, wow, that's a really great program. It's a solid team. I think what gets them more respect is when you have posts or publications like UCF put out today, just notifying, putting out releases saying that, look, every sport in our athletics department finished over 100 for the second year in a row, and we're the only D1 school to do that. I'm not sure if it's only D1 or it's D1, D2, D3 as well, but at least D1, we're the only school to do that back-to-back years in a row. And I think in that case, all programs were helped. Then people look at it like, well, then that entire department must be great. I might not pay attention to women's soccer or men's tennis, but they must be good too because everyone's over 100. Wow. So we have to respect everything from that school. I think that gives the Olympic sports more publicity and credit than just a general college fan who, again, spends most of his time watching college baseball and college basketball and college football.
Well, the clarification they made was among FBS schools.
Okay.
So there's 130 of them. So D1, upper level of Division I. If they're interesting, if there is going to be any sort of kind of, are these the things, Eric, that you think other conferences look at and say, okay, that's a real program over there?
I don't know about that. I think Murph's kind of right. Unfortunately, a lot of the media out there focus on football and basketball and don't cover the other sports.
Right, but they're not the ones who make the decisions.
I don't think the universities do either, though. I don't. I mean, I don't think they look at it and like, whoa, look at that baseball, look at that program over there in tennis. We got to look at that for our league, type of deal. I don't know if it goes that deep. I will say, if that time, part of it is, how are they doing if there is ever a time the conferences change and all that, hey, you know what? If we bring in UCF to our league, look at all their sports, it's not going to hurt us. Whereas I will see, I'll meet you halfway on this, Jeff, is, when there was all the rumblings, what was it, like 4 years ago, 5 years ago, where was there going to be movement? Was there not going to be movement? I do believe that part of the thing that was going to hurt, one of the reasons why I was pretty confident UCF was not going to move, was because their basketball program was not very good at that time. And so like a Big 12, which obviously loves its basketball and it's number one in the league, there was going to be people in there. They're like, you know what? We don't want UCF in here because that would hurt our basketball program. I do believe that. So I think the fact that UCF is showing that they can win at every sport, I think the message that UCF is sending from that standpoint is, if you take us down the road, we will help you and we don't hurt you in anything. We can only help you. And I think that's the notice that perhaps maybe down the road other conferences. The question really is, can UCF maintain this and continue this moving forward? Because, I mean, there's a lot of programs, Murph can speak to this, in the West Coast, especially in the Pac-12, Stanford's and the UCLA's of the world, that win at almost every sport. So it's not like UCF is only.
It's the Conference of Champions.
Conference of Champions, as Bill Walton would say, the Conference of Champions. So, So there's
the
a lot of
passion, the desire.
There you go. That's what I like. Can't believe we did Bill Walton on this program.
Yes.
But that's, I think that's that's the exciting thing about it is, maybe UCF can kind of try to be that East Coast version. Florida and Florida State have had similar success, but no, I think it speaks a lot to Danny White as an athletic director, which is why he'll be a name that's going to be brought up every time there's an athletic director job opening, regardless of where it is. And I think it will help UCF down the road if coaches move on to other jobs. I think UCF is showing that no matter the sport, this is a good job to have here at UCF, regardless of the sport.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. That we obviously we cover a lot of these other sports that we talk about, and it's because we believe in that cause, right? That
yes.
There are good stories to be told by of players and coaches and those deserve attention. And I think to see that validated with what Danny White is doing here, I think is pretty gratifying. And I think both of you are right. Now the question is, what do you do to keep it up? What happens next? Does that promise continue to be fulfilled, or as things change, will certain things go by the wayside? I don't know. That's a good question that we have to.
Well, I think
that only time is going to figure out.
I think facilities will be questioned, and especially baseball and softball, and just can they raise money there? And look, the fans got to step up on this, and some of the media have to step up. I mean, part of the problem in today's sports coverage, it's not like it was 20 years ago. In a lot of ways, the technology's kind of hurt the coverage. It used to be in sports radio and in sports TV that you had to talk about what was going on at that time. Now, people just kind of make up crap. We're spending way too much time talking about 2-for-1s and who you're playing in football in 2028 and what this guy said and stupid crap when there's actually things going on the field that are, to me, more relevant. I've always believed in this, that things that happen on the field should trump anything that goes as far as off-field nonsense. And I think that's, my hope is that, and I think we've seen this with the tennis programs in particular, since they've moved to Lake Nona, they've gotten the sport. That thing has exploded. Jeff, you could speak to this because you've covered it in its day. This thing has exploded. There is not a program on campus that has exploded more than those tennis programs from the on-the-court standpoint and from a fan support. Because when I've seen the highlights on the tennis channel, that place is packed.
Yeah.
And so that thing has exploded. And I think the other sports, we saw that a little bit with volleyball. They had great turnouts in the regionals. Swim and soccer has always been very well supported, and I think that's the next step, is to just support all these teams and the fans. Not just, don't spend an April or May wondering, I wonder who our football team is going to play at left tackle. Come on, guys. Give me a break. I mean, there's too many athletes.
You're foreshadowing.
He's firing shots. Yeah.
I've got to write that article in 2 months.
Yeah.
Well,
Stop.
The key word is 2 months. The key word is 2 months. That's my point. You've got plenty of time in like June, July, and August to ramble about that. We don't need to be talking about that nonsense in like February and March like some of these yahoos do out there in the media and the fan base. Yeah. So, but I just a phenomenal job, and credit again to Danny White. Credit to Danny White, who does not get enough credit for his vision as far as the overall athletic department. Everybody focuses on everything with the football and the basketball, but what he's done across the board is pretty remarkable. And I think if you hear all these coaches, and we've had them on, Jeff, on this show, and they've talked to the media, who's one of the first people they always thank as far as for the reason of the success and giving them the opportunity? Danny White's name is frequently brought up.
Well, he is their boss after all. The other thing is, and I guess we'll wrap up on this, is that I too would like to see this success be rewarded with better in-game attendance for those Olympic sports, and I'll tell you why. Well, I mean, obviously, there's the reasons why are obvious, right? But I've always kind of had this vision. Remember a couple times, Eric, when we were students, right? We would travel with softball or volleyball or women's basketball. We'd travel up to Gainesville, right? I remember one time we were working together, we traveled up to Gainesville for like a Tuesday or Wednesday night regular season softball game. You remember that game, Eric?
Which one again?
It was a game up in Gainesville. I think it was around 2009. It was one where It was one where Tim Walton got kicked out of the game. Remember that?
Well, there have been a few of those, but yeah, I think you're right. It was 2009.
Okay, it's a run-of-the-mill mid-season softball game in Gainesville, and that place was freaking packed. Okay, not because of the opponent. Okay, not because of UCF going up to Gainesville. It was because, hey, the Gators are playing softball tonight, and we're going to go out and see them. Okay, and I would love to see volleyball, women's basketball, baseball a little bit more, although baseball's pretty good, could be better. Softball, the tennis programs, the soccer programs especially. I would love to see that kind of turnout for UCF's Olympic sports to that level that we see at those other schools. And I think that's going to be the measure of do we have a fan base that matches up with the big time that UCF claims to be. And I think if the fan support rallies around that, I think that's going to be that is what will really push this program over the top. I hope we start seeing that. I don't know if we will, but I think I think at the very least the student athletes on those teams deserve that.
Well, and I think you can make revenue. I mean, there's this myth that you can only make revenue with football, and that's it. That's not true. And I know people don't like the Southeast Conference, but the thing I give them credit for, they've invested in their Olympic sports, and all of a sudden, there's a lot of softball programs that are making money. In fact, there was an article on, I believe it was Softball America or Baseball America, where softball has become a revenue sport in a lot of places, and it's the same in baseball. I've talked to people that worked at LSU. They make tons of money at LSU with baseball, and a lot of schools do that. Florida State makes money in baseball.
Yeah.
So you can make revenue in these sports by drawing attendance and having interest there, and it's a fun sport. It's a good product, and it's very affordable. It's a good family, right? Everybody could play. Hey, where do I take my family?
Good family atmosphere, right? You know, and
you're watching, right?
Yeah, and you mentioned
and watch the best.
Yeah, and you mentioned that they make those sports a revenue sport. Remember, it was LSU baseball that per game outdrew the Miami Marlins last year on an average per game.
They're going to do it, and they're going to do it again.
They're probably going to outdraw
the Rays.
They might be climbing up.
Outdraw the Rays.
Yeah.
And let me just defend some of the fans. There's a lot of diehards on those teams. Trust me, I hear on the softball side, I hear it on DMs all the time, good or bad. So I'm quite aware, and I'm quite aware of it in baseball as well. And I'm sure, Jeff, you've heard from diehards in volleyball. So there are, I think I know for a fact that softball season ticket holders have increased over the last handful of years. There's more boosters on the softball, so it's growing. We got to remember, we're still young in a lot of this stuff. So, but I do think there should be more marketing towards these teams. And just get the word out, and let's stop with the I can't believe Mike Orisco said that about us. How dare that? How come that Alabama writer? He's such a shower cap. Stop that. Don't worry about that nonsense. Worry about the product that we're putting on across the board. That's what I would tell the fans.
Well, the other thing too is I hear that all the time. Well, they need to be marketed better. Well, you know that men's soccer exists. Stop saying it doesn't. You know that it does. You know that women's soccer exists and is good. Get out there and go to the games. Well, I mean, that's what it's about.
Where people could get lost. It could get lost. I mean, football is obviously hyped a lot. And, hey, go to football Thursday. So you just got to remind people. I get it. And there's ways to do it. I think it's getting better with social media and things like that. And, I think you also do it by honoring some of your past and, having some people come out to your games and things like that. So, but I think we're headed in the right direction on that. I think certainly there's room for improvement and growth. And, but I think that's the thing that's got to be the message out there that, you go to a UCF sporting event, you're going to see some of the best of the best. Softball plays a great schedule every year. I'm sure, baseball does. They get the Floridas and the Florida States. You're not going to get that in football. All that talk about that. You get that in softball. You get that. Well, we used to get that in baseball. I don't know now anymore. But Florida's little acting. We don't want to play on the road anymore on the bus ride. But I think it's an amazing year, and I hope people don't take it for granted. I certainly don't. And it's been fun to watch all this team success. And the exciting thing is, a lot of these coaches are still new.
Yeah.
Who knows what the future holds with a lot of these programs. I think people just don't have enough patience. Like, I just kind of scoff. I mean, Greg Lovelady in his first 3 years has had the most success that any UCF head coach has ever had in the baseball program.
Yep, fastest UCF coach to 100 wins in history. Faster than Jay Bergman. And yet,
Eric, and yet people are like, should we fire Greg if they don't make the tournament?
Oh, my God.
I tell you, I literally...
Guy is literally maybe 2 games away from being in 3 NCAA tournaments. By the way, I hate to break it to you. A lot of coaches miss tournaments, especially in baseball, which is the most parity sport with random from year to year.
That is,
And I would argue, by the way, in my opinion, I don't know what you both think about this. I think the college baseball head coach is the toughest college coaching job in the country, more than any other sport, because you only have certain amount of scholarships, only certain amount of revenue backing.
Yeah. What is it? What about 11 and a fraction scholarships?
Yeah. Yes.
Is that right, Murph?
Let me tell you something. People forget that about those revenue sports also, is that they're not all all those slots are not all scholarship. College baseball, you have the equivalent. I think it's 11.7 or some crazy number like that.
Yes. And I believe you have 36 roster spots.
Yeah. Yeah. So try and figure that out.
By the way, and then not only that, you got to have a recruiting class that you won't even know how many of your recruiting class that you've worked on for most of the year is actually going to step foot on campus, because you got to wait till the MLB draft is complete, because some of your guys might be too good and actually get drafted. Whereas in football, once you got a guy to verbally commit, he's going to come. You don't have to worry about him skipping to the NFL draft right away. So now, and then if you lose a kid to the MLB draft, you got to replace that kid with somebody else. It's not an easy job at all. I marvel at baseball coaches in college and how they do it. And they got screwed earlier this year when the administrators voted down a third full assistant. They only have 2 full assistants to work with in these jobs.
Right.
And
that third assistant's a volunteer.
Yeah, volunteer. Yeah. And a lot of these teams, by the way, fly commercial. They don't fly charter. So they got classes.
Yeah, so I don't know.
By the way, the CPA has been pretty good around the teams too. By the way.
Yeah, those coaches, and we all know them. The 3 of us, we all know them, and everybody else, we know all these people who coaches in these on those Olympic sports, and we know how hard they work. And
I would argue, Jeffrey, right now, from top to bottom, from a depth standpoint, UCF probably has the most depth and best quality of coaches they've ever had in the history of that school. Agree, disagree? Just from a depth standpoint.
Oof, boy, well, you're putting me on the spot on that one. I would have to.
Last time somebody did.
I would have to go back.
There you go. Well, sounds like a story idea.
It feels like I kind of have to agree with this just because it's results. It's results based, right? And like, so if we're having 2 back-to-back years in which no program has done this, at least in these last 2 years of 500 or better, you're winning more than you lose. You've got to give some credit of all of that to coaching. Yeah, and that's department wide. So at the whole, I feel like the level's got to be yes, because we might have had years in which there were programs that were. It was more of a top-heavy department where you had more programs making the NCAA tournament, or not the NCAA tournament, but performing better. But not as sort of like this across-the-board success. Yeah. In which case, doesn't every coach then say, like, you've never had a year in which you could say every coach was successful, and you could actually say that about every sport this season because they won, at least in one respect, they won more than they lost.
Yeah, no, that's true. You're absolutely right.
Baseball America, by the way, for the Greg Love was mentioned as one of the top 50 rising coaches in the sport.
He's been on that list, I think, 3 years in a row.
Well, that tells you what you need to know right there. So, all right, we're going to take.
Who's going to be the third string quarterback, Brian? How's he looking? What are you hearing?
Oh, all right, I'm going to.
I can't wait for September and all that crap.
I'm going to desperately pull the show back onto the rails and tell you that we'll be back in a little bit to wrap it up here. Our last regular season edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Stick around. We're back after this. All right, we're here to wrap it in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Brian Murphy, and Eric Lopez. All right, so here's the schedule ahead. We got a bunch of stuff coming up in the summer. one of the things we're going to be working on, obviously, is the Banny Awards that are coming up. Next weekend is going to be our nominee week, and we're going to have.
I gotta get my suit ready.
You got to get that tuxedo T-shirt ready there, Lopez. We also have
How
to.
the heck are these? You got some strict rules. I don't know how we're going to fit some of these nominees. There's a lot of nominees, and I don't know how we're going to fit them all.
Listen. The nominations are going to be controversial. Not everyone's going to be happy with it. And quite frankly, I don't care. The following show is going to be the actual winners. So I think what we're going to do is I'm going to have the nominees chosen by us, the staff, and then we'll go to a fan vote, and the fans will vote. In addition to that, we will have we'll also be working on our summer sessions. We'll try and get some alumni on the podcast to talk about their time at UCF. We'll probably re-air some things that we aired during the regular year.
UCF coaches.
Gonna have some UCF coaches on
in the near future as well.
Yep.
Kind of recap this memorable year.
Hey, we've got some other summer sporting events to talk about as well. I would love to try and get, for example, Tiffany Roberts-Hadak on to talk about the World Cup. We'll see. I don't know. She's traveling around all over the place. So,
for UCF alums / players, they're getting ready for the Women's World Cup. It starts actually in a week from this Friday.
Right. Exactly. So there's a lot to talk about there. We'll also be, just trying to. We got a couple of interesting things I want to do. I want to work on my, the features that I've been doing on, tracking UCF recruiting classes. I know, Eric, you've been working on some, we've always got stuff in the hopper about, top 10 lists and things like that. I actually went on Mark Rogers' show just recently to introduce his national audience to the 4 greatest wins in UCF history.
I can't believe the 4 selections you did. You've left out some interesting ones.
Well, I only had 4, man. You got to make some cuts. It certainly stirred some discussion. Murph, I know you're going to be. What are you going to be doing?
I'll be talking. No, Jeffrey, I'm going to go on a sabbatical. I'm going to Malaysia. No, I'm going to be talking to Johnny Dawkins hopefully before the draft. So
that's right. We got the NBA draft coming up, MLB draft coming up too.
Yeah, MLB. Well, I'll be faithfully following the MLB draft from round 1 to round 200 and whatever they got through Twitter, because you never know. There's always, this UCF team doesn't have a lot of high-end prospects, kind of like they did last year. So, you might see guys go off in rounds 30 and 40, and I'll be there with a tweet just on it like that.
Hey, come on. You're selling it. There's only 40 rounds, okay? 40 rounds.
It feels like forever.
How did what round was Mike Piazza selected? It wasn't like
162.
162?
No, 62.
Oh,
I think it was
62?
round 62.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. All right. I thought it was like somewhere in the hundreds. I don't know. Lopez, I know you got. What are some of the things that you have in the hopper that you've been thinking about?
Oh my God! We're gonna get into. We're gonna do some rankings once the year's done.
Yep.
What were the top games of the year, as far as that's concerned, and certainly in all sports, we'll do a lot of that in the summer, and we'll probably, who knows, there'll be some other.
Here's my one request, Eric. Okay, because
want me to find out who's going to be the left tackle?
No.
Backup?
No. If when you do your top 19 games of 2019, okay, please put them in 19 different posts so that I don't have to edit a 3,000 word magnum opus with tied for 17th. And all that kind of stuff. I need it's 19 days of content.
Way to give away our secrets, Jeffrey. Way to go.
Listen, it's 19 days of content that I need to get me through the summer because there's no sports happening. Okay, so
that sounds good.
Spread it out.
Fantastic. We just had a great discussion that no one heard about content production, and this is totally the vein of that.
Oh yeah. Listen,
turn it out.
We are feeding the beast out there, and we do that for you, the beast, the fans, of course, naturally. You're welcome. And there's plenty more that we'll be working on our, like I said, summer sessions, our summer report cards for all the sports. Where we actually got one up there as well for softball to kind of preview on that one. There's just a lot going on that we're going to be keeping an eye on. Obviously, I'm looking forward to the NBA draft. Does Aubrey Hawkins go? Does Taco Fall go? Does BJ Taylor? Where does BJ Taylor land? It's going to be a lot of fun. So, and of course, alumni stuff as well. Baseball alumni. Jermaine Taylor's back in the Big Three this year, so that's going to be fun to watch. And yeah, so it's going to be fun. So keep an eye on us at blackandgoldbanneret.com for all the latest. Follow us individually at Jeff_Sharon on Twitter, as well as Spokes_Murphy, Eric Lopez Elo, UCF_Banneret to follow all of us. Don't forget also to follow Luke Saris. And you also want to follow Jeremy Brenner and all of us out there as well. So thanks again to you, the fans, for listening throughout this year. And we got the Bannies coming up, nominee show next week, and the Banny Awards the week after. Follow us at blackandgoldbanneret.com for all the latest. For Eric Lopez and Brian Murphy, I'm Jeff Sharon saying thanks for listening. This has been Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We'll catch you next week for the Bannies.